All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mike Colón podcast. This is episode 113. Wow, we're over 100 shows now. It's
Lucky
amazing.
number.
Indeed. So if you haven't checked out the previous episode 112, that was volume 5 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. And that was with retired NYPD emergency service sergeant Anthony Lisi. He was a lot of fun, talked about his time in the unit. He had a lot of interesting jobs, had a pipe bomb thrown at him, had a couple of shootouts too. The guy had quite the run in 22 years on the NYPD. So we go from the E-Men to one of my favorite miniseries as well, which has really become the backbone or one of the backbones to this show. And that is Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of both the NYPD's Arson Explosion Squad and the Bomb Squad. I mean, when I started it, I could have never envisioned it getting to this point. But now here we are, volume 14. And for volume 14, we're bringing back somebody who helped start the miniseries with volumes 1 and 2. And that is my next guest for a specific case that we'll dive into right now. It was the night of October 8th, 2000. It was around the time of Yom Kippur. And it was a quiet fall Sunday in New York City. Not much was going on. The big story at the time was the Yankees and the Mets were in the playoffs, and they would eventually play each other in the World Series until this happened, as ceremonies were taking place at the conservative synagogue Adath, Israel of Riverdale, excuse me if I mispronounce anything in there. All seemed normal until it was not. In one terrifying instant, 2 Molotov cocktails flew through the doors, resulting in a vicious firebombing. Tasked with investigating this disturbing incident of 8 was the NYPD's Arson Explosion Squad, and among the catching detectives involved in hunting down the perpetrators is my next guest, who's returning for what will be another installation of this miniseries, Tales from the Boom Room. He was a 16-year veteran of the time when this incident took place, and he was in his 9th year with the Arson Explosion Squad, and that is Bill Ryan, who rejoins us now on the Mike Colón podcast. Bill, good to have you back on the show, man. Welcome back.
Always happy to be here, Mike. Always happy to talk with you. Thank you for having me.
And no problem. It's great to have you here. So the night itself, I always like to start there. October 8th, 2000, you're in, the squad doing whatever you're doing, probably looking over some case files and whatnot. And then you get the call that this happened. Take it from there.
It didn't even happen like that. At the time this was going on, I was doing a lot of side work, and I was, believe it or not, I was guarding the residence of the late DMX up in Mount Kisco. So I wasn't even on duty when the crime happened. I didn't even know it happened until I got up that morning and started watching it on the news. And, the minute you see it, you're like, oh, this is going to be a mess. And because you're up all night working, I have the phone on silent. So, it wasn't until I'm sitting there having cornflakes and coffee that I'm going, oh my God, this is going to be quite the mess. I wasn't the catching detective who caught it. It was one of my partners, Detective Kevin Perrette, another retired first grade NYPD detective, great arson investigator. And the case had already been going on for the whole day by the time I had found out about it. And it wasn't until the next day when we come in and we're going over everything and deciding, okay, what needs to be done, what hasn't been done. Start dividing up the work, talk to the guys who are actually at the scene, see what we got, see what we don't have. We were also working in conjunction with our friends in the hate crimes task force. And of course, our friends in the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, who among their many responsibilities is handling all investigations on the federal level to houses of worship. And, for whatever reason, I kind of became like the house of worship guy. My first house of worship case was July 12th of 93. And I think that was my first one, because I had to become the church guy. I'm like, because nobody else wanted it. But it was an exciting case. And when we first came in, we're going over all the evidence, but there was a lot of work done on it. And, part of the problem when you have a case with this kind of high profile is there's the normal work you have on a case, and then you have all the city hall stuff. City hall is screaming, upstairs is screaming, the community is screaming, everybody's screaming. I always said, I think they believe if we get to a certain decibel level, we'll give them the answer. But we had some excellent investigators on it, and we just started the case like you would have, like any normal case. All right, what's our physical evidence? What do we have? Do we have video? Do we have, we have Molotov cocktails at the scene? Do we have prints? there was a purplish tint in the what was that? Yeah, there was interviews that were done by two excellent guys who really don't get enough credit in the case. Was Nealons and Honinger. They were the overnight patrol sergeant and his driver, and very fortunate for us in that when they suspects were doing this, they got out of the car and they were running around, and Nealons and Honinger saw them. And so, what are these guys doing? Because the area they're in, for your audience doesn't know Riverdale. I mean, this area it's a really nice area. It's right off of Henry Hudson Parkway. It's not a busy street. It's very tree lined. It's a really, really nice area. And the synagogue itself is kind of in an area with a lot of trees, a lot of covering. So why would you get out there, unless you had something to do with the synagogue? And they saw the passengers in the car get out and run around, and they pulled up to the red car they were driving in, and the driver, who we later identified as a guy named Muhammad Al-Faqih, they ran his plate in the police computer, had his thing, and they saw that he lived in Yonkers, which is 5 minutes away. And, they didn't pull him over. He actually, was just pull up next to him and, hey, you look lost. Oh yeah, I'm trying to find Yonkers. Really? Because you live one exit away. So I can't find you're lost. And, some informal questioning, never even a full stop where they pulled them over and did any of this. It was more of an inquiry on it. And sometimes, that's how you keep guys out of trouble. You let them know you're out there watching them and looking at them. And it wasn't until early in the morning when the caretakers for the synagogue came in and saw the broken doors and the Molotovs that he realized, they called the police, and they realized, okay, these guys were more likely than not had something to do with this crime. So, we had to go out and find them and re-interview them. They were interviewed by night watch detectives, or detectives assigned overnight to the whole borough who were doing some cases. And, they told us about what happened. We were able to, from the computer that was in the car, we were able to pull the name, address, and the information on the car that was pulled over. So, I mean, that was just absolutely invaluable, just to have a place where you've got a car that was there, you've got these guys running around. So that morning, one of the first things that was done, at least by my part, I mean, certainly everybody was running around doing different things, but I said, for me, I like to always go to the scene. So I went back to the scene, myself, another detective, John Patain, and an ATF agent. I think it was, I'm embarrassed to say, I can't remember who it was.
Well, it's been 21 years.
It'll come back to me. But we went back to the scene, and, having had the benefit of reading the report that the night watch detectives had from the sergeant and the police officer that pulled them over, I started walking the area, and I said, it seemed like everybody was kind of concentrating over here where the synagogue was, but the car and everything was, much, much further down the road where these guys were seen running. I'm like, let's just walk it and see what we can see. And we ended up finding plastic gloves, not like crime scene gloves, but like more like food server gloves, something you'd wear if you were making sandwiches or working with food, light plastic, not form fitting or latex. It kind of hugs your hand, and there was purple tint on it. And we realized, since it was purple tint on the Molotov cocktails, this is more likely than not additional evidence in the case. So now we've got that. So now we've got to call crime scene back, have them come photograph it, retrieve it, send it to the laboratory for examination. Of course, now we're calling back and letting everybody know, especially Detective Perret, since he's the lead investigator on the case, hey, this is what we've got. This is what we're going to do. And the Molotovs themselves, the bottles, were made with a really cheap off-brand vodka. I'm not going to say their name because I don't need to get sued by the company, but they were kind of an off-brand type of vodka. So, not one of the big distilleries that, normally sells the stuff. And we were canvassing liquor stores. Hey, anybody buy this? Anybody buy this? And, eventually we found the liquor store in Yonkers on Broadway where, and it was funny because I remember the display rack, it was like cardboard with black cardboard. You could see, I guess there weren't many people that bought it because there were 2 dust rings on the display. And I asked the guy in the liquor store, "Hey, you sell a lot of this?" He goes, "I've sold 2 bottles." "Really? Who'd you sell them to?" And he knew the guys that were selling it. One of the kids, or the young men, I want to call him a kid, that was doing this. He goes, "Yeah, it's the fellow that works in the deli up the block." And they knew his name, and we bought 2 of them. Told us when he bought them, and it was the night of the attack. And it was just these guys were really the gang that couldn't shoot straight. Something we found out later on the night of the arrest, that while they were buying the liquor, they were double parked, and the Yonkers police gave them a double parking ticket in the same red car that was later stopped by Nealons and Hollinger. So, and we only knew that when we talked to them later on when they were being interviewed. So we had the benefit of being able to talk to the Yonkers cops. They I don't say they know them, but they knew who they were. They were able to identify them. So, it wasn't like they were going to be able to doubt they were buying it, because the guy in the liquor store knew them. Cops in Yonkers knew them. They got the ticket there. So, you just kind of working your way towards locking them in so that they can't dance out to what, that they were there, what they did. And, there was a lot of surveillance done. We had to make sure that Nealons and Hollinger could ID some of the people that they saw that night. They were able to help us with that. And eventually, we ended up locking everyone up. It was the same week. I mean, I don't think it was a week into the case where we actually locked them up. And, we brought people in, and, I interviewed some people. Detective Perrette interviewed some people. Other detectives interviewed other people in the case. And eventually, 4 young men were arrested. We found out, that one of them or all of them, they hung out at a place called the Madaba Deli on Broadway in Yonkers. And, looks like when they were there, that's where the serving gloves come from. And we were able to do searches on the car. I think parts of I'm doing this from memory now, but I think parts of the cloth they found in the car matched part of the wicks that were in the Molotov cocktail bottles. So it was really interesting. We had a lot of good forensic cases, a lot of good forensic evidence on it. But, like a lot of these cases, Mike, it comes down to, being fortunate to have people like, Nealons and Hollinger being able to see this and react to it and do something with it. And even though it didn't do something that night, the dividend paid off very quickly. And would we have caught them without it? I think we would have, because we're good at what we do. I think eventually we would have found a liquor store that would have led us to at least one of the suspects. But, it's just invaluable, especially when you bring them in and you question them. And what are you going to say if you're Muhammad Al-Faqih? You weren't there. The cops talked to you. You know that you talked to the cops. You were in your car. It's your car. Mason Assi, the kid that worked in the deli who bought the liquor bottles, was he going to say these guys don't know him? I mean, he used to deliver lunch to them. So it's a little tough for them to dance around. Oh, was it a misidentification? You're not dealing with people that are necessarily strangers. You had interactions with them. And, was interesting about it was, there was many interesting things about the case, but from a legal point of view, New York had not had a hate crime law, and a hate crime law had passed, and it took place at midnight. And I think these guys attacked it. I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So these 4 young men were going to be the first people tried under the hate crime law. And I mean, the ink wasn't even dry on the paper for the hate crime law. If they'd gone a day before, they would have been punished. They would have been punished, but a little bit less. But 3 hours into it, they were the first people that were being charged under this. And, part of the problem with that is, we got confessions from certain, I think 3 of the 4 of them confessed, 1 didn't. And now when you're going to do a case like this and they're hiring people like Lynn Stewart and Stanley Cohen, and you remember Lynn Stewart, she represented Omar Abdul Rahman in the 93 Trade Center bombing.
Blonde Shake.
Stanley Cohen, who who, you know, and it's funny, Stan's office was down the block from ours. I used to see Stan all the time. You know, it's not personal. It's lawyer. You know, it's like one of those things when you're playing baseball. You know what I mean? You know, I'm playing ball against you. You know, I'm mad at you right now, but you know, when I see him in the street, you know, we never got into the case or any problems. But you know, they had heavy radical lawyers representing them, and I don't know where they were getting the money for that. I remember Stanley Cohen was famously quoted as saying that if they had arrested Osama bin Laden, he'd be like one of the first guys to represent him. And, you know, that's the kind of guys you have coming in. And, you know, Lynn Stewart, of course, with the work with the Blind Shake, I got to tell you, I think if I'm accused of a hate crime or something that sounds terroristic, you know, do I want to hire the terrorist lawyer? You know what I mean? It kind of makes me look.
Maybe not. Maybe
I don't know.
not.
Well, he was found guilty and got 16 years. So
there you go.
You know, I'm not saying that was directly the lawyers. You know, you can never predict the jury, but it was interesting too in that one of the 4 people that were arrested was a juvenile, and he's obviously an adult now. And I'm not going to say his name just because I don't know what the
statutes are
on his. You know, why stick your toe in that water? But, you know, the problem with having a juvenile case is a juvenile tried with the adults is that it gets tried in family court. And family court goes like that. You know, you can wait a year to go to trial with a criminal case, but with family court, you know, you go immediately. And I think the trial in family court, which was handled by Assistant Corporation Counsel Abby Sonnen, great lawyer, we're close friends. She actually did a lot of my juvenile fire cases. Very, very talented lawyer. The trial went 16 months because you don't get blocks of time. So you get like 2 hours today, 2 hours next week, where the judge sees it. So it ended up being top of the first hate crime. I don't know if the record's been passed, but at the time it was the longest trial in New York State family court history. And all the testimony and everything you get from the first trial in family court, the defense in the adult court gets to see all that. So they basically see where your trial is, see what you're going to say, copies of your testimony. So, you know, when they get to go in and try and do the trials for the 2 adults who were tried simultaneously, by the way, we had to have 2 juries seated in the courtroom. And what happened was, some testimony both juries got to hear. By example, things about the forensic evidence. But when it came down to when I talked about what Mason S.C. said to me in his confession, only Mason's jury heard that. And conversely, when Detective Perrette was testifying about Muhammad al-Faqih and his statement, only Muhammad al-Faqih's jury got to hear that. So the trial went on a very long time. A lot of press was covering it. You know, there was a lot of pressure on everybody because, you know, nobody wants to lose a high-profile case. I don't want to lose a low-profile case. I don't like to lose. But, you know, if you lose something like this, you know, the community is going to be like, you know, how did you let this go? You know, how did you, and you know, it was a terrible thing. I mean, this happened on Yom Kippur. It's the one of the holiest days in the Jewish calendar, and you know, the area of Riverdale has a lot of houses of worship. It has many Jewish ones, but it also has, you know, Christian and different faiths are represented there. And you know, attack on one is an attack on all of them. But I think when you go into a quiet neighborhood like that and you do something like this, I mean, it just shakes the foundation. And you know, it's pretty outrageous that they did this. But you know, it's interesting, and you probably saw this on my LinkedIn page where, you know, when I asked Muhammad al-Faqih why he was doing this, yeah, he was talking about how there was a case where an Israeli soldier allegedly shot a little boy who was being cradled by his father, and there was a protest against Israel, and I think in the days leading up to the firebombing, there was a rally in Times Square. I think they all attended with their families, and people were very emotional about it. And they were saying that when they were, well, Muhammad al-Faqih and Mazen Assi were basically saying that they were so outraged by this that they wanted to do something, and they wanted to send a message to the Jewish communities. And when I interviewed Mazen Assi, and I was letting him talk and tell me, all right, I don't understand. Tell me why you're doing this. And we were sitting in the precinct was so crowded. We were actually interviewing him in it was the auxiliary police station, the auxiliary police office room in the 50th precinct, and started banging on the tables, talking about the rich. I'm not going to say the profanities, but the rich effing Jews. They send money to Israel and buys bullets, and they kill people, and we don't want them to stop. And this is he was trying to say it was like a message, like it was they don't deny they were doing it. I don't think even when Stanley Cohen and Lynn Stewart and the other attorneys were representing them, they weren't saying that they didn't do it. They were just saying it wasn't a hate crime, trying to almost like in the riots we're having now, social justice, you're hearing people talk about, oh, this is just, this is political speech. This is, this is a form of protest, if you will. And I always say, if the trial happened today, would they have convicted these kids? In the climate we have now, you're getting people taking Molotov cocktails and, and throwing it at police stations, at courthouses. I think people have kind of almost accepted it, and as a form of protest. And I got to tell you, I really am curious to see if that happened today. Would we have had a jury that would have convicted them, or would they have convicted them of part of it and not have convicted them of the hate crime? So what a difference a couple of years makes.
Bill Reiner is our guest here in the Mike Colón podcast. He's returning. We're happy to have him. This is volume 14 of Tales from the Boom Room, Profiles of the NYPD's Arson Explosion. And Bob's going to mention, well, a little inside baseball here. Tales from the Boom Room, the reason why that miniseries was born, the name of it, Bill and I were spitballing off the air because I was that same week that he came on originally, I was supposed to interview Dan McNally as well. And from the listeners, Danny has since come on the show twice, and he's a great guy and a good friend. And I said, Bill, what am I supposed to call this? Because, even though you guys were in different squads, it's kind of the same thing. And thus, Tales from the Boom Room was born. And so I have to give a little tip of the hat to Bill for that. And, it's interesting because I was actually going to, and you just explained it, so that answers the question. I was going to ask, I was like, what was the world climate at the time? Because listen, Israel and Palestine, that's a beef as old as time. That beef's been going on forever, unfortunately. Sure. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, we're 2 years, this is 2000. We're 2 years out from the embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, which Osama bin Laden was responsible for. We're 7 years out from the 93 World Trade Center bombing, which Osama bin Laden was also responsible for. 97, the guys that did the 93 bombing, Ramzi Youssef and all those guys, they got convicted in a trial in November of 97. And then earlier that summer, there was the pipe bomb scare, also by 2 Islamic terrorists, in which the guys from the bomb squad and ESU thwarted that. So we're in a little bit of an interesting time here with this, to where I have a couple of articles I'm going to read. One you just talked about, which was a New York Post article from October 24th, 2002. It's brief. And it says, a young man accused of tossing homemade firebombs at a Bronx synagogue told cops he wanted to send the blanking rich Jews from Riverdale a message, as Bill was just alluding to. Detective testified yesterday. Detective William Ryan, who was sitting before me, of course, said Mazen Assi spoke to cops a few days after the October 8th, 2000 attempted firebombing of the conservative synagogue Adath, Israel of Riverdale, which failed because the bombs fizzled. Now, we'll pause there, and we'll go to a New York Times article from the day after the firebombing, or attempted firebombing, dated October 9th, 2000, which reads as follows. You heard Bill mention earlier the purplish taint that was found on some of these gloves and also the bottles that were used in this. And it says as followed. A Bronx synagogue was vandalized yesterday, hours before the start of Yom Kippur. The police were investigating the attack, in which a bottle of purplish liquid, as I said earlier, Bill just alluded to, was thrown against an entrance door at the conservative synagogue Adath Israel of Riverdale at West 250th Street. and the Henry Hudson Parkway at about 9 a.m. The attack caused initial concern that someone had thrown a firebomb, but the police had ruled out that possibility by the afternoon. And so, returning to the conversation here, I mean, granted, as you just said, this case moved relatively quickly. You got these guys within a week. The trial was a little bit longer, but the apprehension process itself was not. Considering all the prior events that had happened, some of which had happened in New York with the Youssef trial, the bombing of the Trade Center in 93, the attempt in 97 to blow up subways in Brooklyn, and obviously the age-old beef, as I mentioned, between Israel and Palestine, it was the thought of terrorism something that was initially pursued? I mean, obviously, I imagine, given the circumstances of the time, it might have been the initial theory, right?
You never know what exactly happened. You can't take anything off the table, but like any good investigator will tell you, Mike, you've got to let the evidence drive you to where you're going. Again, having the benefit of having that car plate run and having a name and we certainly, and again, we were partnering on the investigation with the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and John Lavin. That's who I was with, the ATF, and I knew he'd come back to me. And hello, John. So we were working with them on this and giving them names and asking them to check and see if these guys were on any kind of watch list or terror groups. But I don't necessarily remember them necessarily coming back as they were anybody. It's also, at the time, Mike, our parent command, SID, the Special Investigations Division, it encompasses arson explosion, but it also, at the time, encompassed the Joint Terrorist Task Force. So, we were always working as part of that. So we had detectives in the Joint Terrorist Task Force. Everybody's feeding each other information on it. But, I don't know if we necessarily thought it was terrorism right away, but we don't discount it. It's like, okay, let's follow the evidence. We've got the plates, we've got a name. Let's talk to these guys. Let's find out where you can get those are kind of esoteric because you can find out later on. We've got this off-brand vodka. Let's find out who sells it. Let's find out what store they bought it from. This guy ran this plate in the car. Let's follow him. Let's see who he hangs out with. Maybe by following him, we can find out where he hangs out. Maybe we can identify the other guys that were with him. So, you try to handle it like any normal investigation. And if it leads to terrorism, it leads to terrorism. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But, you really have to be driven by the evidence and the facts of the case. If you go in saying it's terrorism or you have a mindset about how you're going to view it, you always have the risk of tailoring your work to fit the perception rather than letting the facts lead you to what is going on. So I don't think we discounted it, but I don't think it was something that was jumping up and down. I mean, again, different squads have different issues with it. I'm sure the guys in Terrorist Task Force and ATF, they had different concerns in it. The guys who signed detectives in the hate crimes unit, who were great help to us, some excellent people that we worked with. Everybody answers, even though we're all working with the police department, we're all answering kind of different things that are our responsibility in it. To us, we have an attempted arson to a house of worship. That's what we're charged with looking at. Let's take a look at it there. And if it leads to the other things, we'll deal with that when it comes to that. But right now, let's find out who's the guys that did this. That's the important thing. Let's find them, make a good case on him, and have them arrested. I'm sure after we were done and we had all four of them identified and, now we have pictures and fingerprints and everything, I'm sure our friends in the federal government did things that, looking at terrorist aspects of it. But for us in the arson explosion and the hate crimes guy, it was okay. We've got a house of worship on attempted fire. Let's just get these guys locked up and make a case on it, the best case we can, get them indicted and go to trial. At the end of the day, do I really care if it was terrorism? I mean, it's interesting it is, but at the end of the day, to me, it's more important that, they said we did it, here's how we did it. and yeah, this is why. But I mean, um, I think it would probably make a difference now, though, in the trial. Like I said a little early in the conversation, where protests and you're seeing the use of Molotov so often in protests now, and it's almost grown acceptable. I mean, you've had people that have thrown Molotovs at occupied police cars. They're firebombing courts. The groups like Antifa and whatever, they're out there, doing these things. And I think a lot of it. I mean, you've even had 2 attorneys arrested in Brooklyn setting fire to police cars. I mean, I just think that people are using fire now to express displeasure with the political system or some society's ills. It seems like it's becoming dangerously too common and accepted. And I know I sound like a bit of a broken record, but I'm wondering if this trial happened today with this climate, would they have been treated the way they were treated? Would they have? Would we have had a guilty verdict? And out of all of them, the only one of the 4, there was one guy who wasn't indicted. So we only had 3 that went to trial. The juvenile was convicted, and the 2 adults, Mazen Assi and Mohammed Al-Faqih. Mazen Assi was convicted of the hate crime. Mohammed Al-Faqih was not. He was convicted of other crimes that he went to jail time. But it's tough when you're doing this to try to get, if you play it up that it's a form of protest. I think people, they've grown to accept that, and it's a real problem going forward. Not just burning police cars in courts, but I mean, it just seems like they're nothing seems to be off limits, and I'm seeing more and more use of fire as a means to express political discord, and it's scary times, Mike.
Yeah, and what you have to remember is, listen, like, for example, throwing a Molotov cocktail, even if the van's empty, what I said at the time was this: there's a gas tank in that van, as an example. If the fire spreads to the gas tank, what can happen? An explosion. If there's people in the street, what's going to happen to those people? They could get hurt, if not killed. Shrapnel flies out. So that's an aspect of it that makes it dangerous too. And the reason why I asked the question in regards to terrorism is because, as you remember from the first time you were on the show, there was the case involving the serial arsonist, that was burning synagogues in 1995. And it turns out it wasn't some anti-Semite. It was a Jewish guy who was kind of going through some bad times in his life. Nobody was giving him any money, and he was just burning synagogues just because that was his avenue, and that was his situation. So you mentioned, obviously, I think we were talking off the air about, of course, the political aspects of the case. The New York Times article I have in front of me, dated October 9th, 2000, says, Mayor Rudolph W. Giuliani, who of course was the mayor of New York City at the time, also traveled to the Bronx after hearing of the incident. The mayor, quote, wanted to reassure everyone, said his spokeswoman at the time was a woman by the name of Sunny Mandel. So that being said, their involvement, when you heard about that, I'm sure you guys were just going, oh, great. They're going to be honest now, because listen, the Jewish community in New York City particularly has a lot of sway. And there are large communities everywhere in the city of 8 million. Actually, there's a large Hispanic community, a large African-American community, but the Jewish community has always been quite vocal. And there's different sides of it. Of course, there's the Hasidics in Brooklyn and other outlets of it as well. But given this particular community's history in the city, tell me about the pressure that was coming and how annoying, if you will, for lack of a better way to word it, the pressure was coming from City Hall.
I was very fortunate. Again, when the mayor and all the power brokers who were, Fernando Ferrer was there, who was the borough president at the time. Everybody needs to come up and show their support and do what they got to do. They don't call you directly. This. I mean, you got a house of worship. There's going to be a problem. And you got to appreciate too, Mike, that, and, defense attorneys try this when we go to trial on cases like this. Oh, this is a big case. What? We're the Arson Explosion Squad. This is what we deal with. We always deal with big cases. If it wasn't big, we wouldn't be getting it. If it wasn't newsworthy, we wouldn't be getting it. It's not my first dance. It certainly wasn't anybody involves first house of worship fire. And, I mean, are they there? Are they, is there pressure going on? Yeah, there is. There's going to be people asking for it. And, you got to find a way to use that sometimes, and say, hey, we need to get resources. We need to get this. We need to get that. I think that I think we were able to convince everybody involved. Let me back up and say this. When the mayor or the PC or the chief of detectives, if they feel you've got it, if they feel like, okay, you guys got a handle on this, you're working on it, you got suspects, you're putting a case together, that makes them feel, okay, that you've got this. All right, I trust these guys. They know what they're doing. It's kind of when you don't have it that, that happens. When I was having the Rockaway case that we talked about a moment ago, in the beginning, who are we looking at? I don't know. What do we got? I don't know. That's bad answers. Here, we didn't have that. Here, okay, we had this young man, here's his plate, we got his name, we have something to start with. We've got meat on the table right away. And I mean, there wasn't a single day in the case that significant developments happened. If it was like the next morning, me going down with Detective Patain and finding the gloves and locating the store that bought the liquor, and we moved on it really quickly, put a lot of people on it, and a lot of manpower, and we were able to make everybody running the case, or all the suits, if you will, they say, all right, these guys got this, So if it was a case where it was dragging on and we had nothing and nothing was developing and nothing was going on, I'm sure there'd be a different kind of pressure. Let's call it that, instead of, little pressure, a lot of pressure. I mean, all cases are important, but this is the one that, the fact that it was the first hate crime, you've got, Robert Johnson, the late Robert Johnson, he's since passed away, but he was the elected Bronx district attorney at the time, now he's got to worry about, he's got a very politically active community, and, what are we doing with this case? And we were lucky. We had excellent ADAs on it, our friend and longtime colleague, Jeffrey Luxman, who we did so many arson cases with Jeff. Jeff was the best friend we had in any DA's office. And then, of course, he was working with and one of his associates, Michael Cooper. Michael has since passed, of course, but two great attorneys. And, we got a lot of great help. And again, as I mentioned, Abby Sonnen, who was the assistant corp counsel who did the juvenile cases. These are people that we do fires to churches. We do big marquee investigations. So everybody felt like, okay, I've got my 18 people on this. And again, we had this in the bag, and these guys locked up before the end of the week. So we're always making them feel like we've got it under control. We're never given the reason to lose faith in us. So, but I mean, was there pressure? Yeah, you're going to have a fire to a church, or an attempted fire to a church. You're going to get pressure. But I've done many fires to houses of worship. Unfortunately, people are surprised how many end up happening and how often. After a while, it becomes, all right, I got another one, and not to diminish it, but it's also too, Mike, like when you have a bombing case go on, like a pipe bomb would go off, and precinct is all flipping out. Oh, this is going on. I'm like, why are you so calm? I'm like, because this is not the first time I've done. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I handle it. This is why a unit like us exists. And I think it's like anything else. You have good people that know what they're doing, and we had wonderful bosses that were, John Santos was great, Fred Manzolillo was great. Out there making everything happen for us. I mean, it was, we had the A team out there, and of course, you have a lead investigator like Detective Perrette, you can't go wrong. I mean, he's wonderful investigator. He comes from an arson investigating family. His dad was an arson investigator. He works in the private sector now, doing that. I always enjoy working case with him. He's very knowledgeable, and he took really all the heat and the pressure, because when it's your name on top of the folder, you're taking the heat. I mean, he handled it well. This is, again, Mike, this is who we are. This is what we do.
Kevin Perretta, come on the show. If you're interested, Bill's been on the show. All the guys from the bomb squad. Hey, I'll try to find him and I'll try to give him a call, because it's interesting. Also, at the same time, this is a minor detail, but it's worth mentioning. There's a new police commissioner. Bernie Carrick had just taken over 2 months prior. This happened in October of 2000, August of 2000. He comes in, and so obviously he's got to give some answers to Rudy, who's his boss, and he wants to have something to give to his boss, and so there was that added element too.
And Carrick lived in the area.
Yeah, he lived out there. That wasn't too far.
I don't want to say where, but he lived in that precinct. So, I think he had reached out. I'm reasonably certain about this, Mike. I think that there was a big reach out to the religious community before this happened. And talking about how you were going to secure things, and when you reach out and you assure everybody this is going to happen and we're going to be looking out for you, and then you have a firebombing. I got it. I don't have it, so you have to solve it so that, okay, I didn't get it, but, I was able to pick it up and, and throw to first or whatever, but, it's interesting too, at the trial, one of the things that, was problematic, for the trial was that this is a case that happened. And by the time we went to trial, 9/11 had happened.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that.
And the defense attorneys were asking, the judge we had was Judge Stephen Barrett. They were asking Judge Barrett about a change of venue, because they said that in New York City, because of all the publicity and because of 9/11, and people are going to have an anti-Arab bias, and all the people that were arrested in the case were of Arab descent. They thought it would just be tough for them to get a jury. And Judge Barrett rightly was telling the defense attorneys, okay, so where in the state of New York or the United States of the world am I going to move this trial where they're not going to know about 9/11? And he told them, rightly so, I think, in my opinion, at least in Bronx County, you've got a more diverse population. You probably get a better diverse jury pool, and kept the trial. And again, it was interesting because it was the first hate crime trial. It was 2 trials going on in the courtroom simultaneously. There was a lot of firsts, a lot of interesting things happened. And it was a lot of fun to work on it. It's like anything else, Mike. Some of these cakes that give you a headache. They're fun to talk about after you've caught the guy, but we could sit here and talk about cases I didn't solve, and I'd be like, yeah.
There you go. But I was going to ask him, you guys, you mentioned earlier having a lot of manpower on it because obviously ATF was there and there was the hate crimes task force. I mean, this is a firebombing, even if they didn't do it right. Thank God they didn't do it right, but it's still a firebombing. You guys got any help from the bomb squad on this?
No, we didn't have the bomb squad on it, but we did have help from our friends and colleagues in the Bureau of Fire Investigation, the New York City Fire Marshal, who I'm sorry, guys, I didn't mean to not include you, but they were there and they contributed to the case as well. But it wasn't a explosive device. It was more of an incendiary device. And there wasn't anything in it that needed the bomb squad's level of expertise. It wasn't something that had to be disassembled or, this is what we do in A&E. This is what the fire marshals do. We handle physical evidence like this. So we're kind of the guys that do this. I mean, if it was something that we thought we needed the bomb squad, we'd certainly have called them up. But this particular case, they're always welcome to come, but I don't think we asked them. But you know what, too? That being said, Mike, I didn't go to the scene till the next day. I remember, like I said, I'm up all night guarding DMX, and I wake up and I'm watching New York One, and I'm watching all this going on. I'm like, oh my God,
that'll keep you up all night watching DMX. Not to speak a little.
He was a pleasure. Everyone said all these bad things about him. He was always we'd sit in. He really at that stage of his life wanted to really break into movies, and I'm a film student who became a cop, so we would sit around and talk about movies. He cooked for me a bunch of times. It was actually, it was always nice to me. He never never gave me a hard time, but yeah.
No, he didn't strike me as a bad guy. He just had, he had his demons, unfortunately. But this
A
is
lot of these
interesting.
guys too. It's an image. You know what I mean? It's like they've got a certain gangster. But
right. It's the same thing with wrestlers too. They're putting on it's show business. Bill Ryan's our guest here on the Mike Colón podcast. He has returned for volume 14 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles the NYPD's Arson Explosion and Bomb Squad. Now we fast forward 10 years, and we'll go back to 2000 in a moment. Article here from New York Daily News by Brendan Brosh. New York Appeals Court rejects Mazen Assey's claim that firebombing a synagogue is not a hate crime. Gee, I wonder why. Yeah. The article reads, ruling on the case of a man who tried to firebomb a Bronx synagogue, an appeals court has decided someone can be guilty of a hate crime for attacking a building, not a person. Well, they did this, as you mentioned earlier, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was there, thankfully, but still. The opinion by the state's highest court shot down an appeal filed by Mr. Assey, who tossed Molotov cocktails at Congregation Adath, Israel, and Riverdale on the day before Yom Kippur in 2000. He was convicted of attempted arson and criminal mischief as hate crimes and sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison in 2003. So he's probably out by now. As he claimed in his appeal that his conviction should be reversed, because the hate crime statutes applied to people, not property. The Court of Appeals disagreed, saying, quote, it is self-evident, although the target of the defendant's criminal conduct was a building. The true victims were the individuals of Jewish faith who were members of the synagogue, Judge Victoria Grafeo wrote. So, that makes plenty of sense because, you talked earlier about firebombing courts. Okay, you're setting fire to a court, you're setting fire to a police van. What's the message? You're not just setting fire because I woke up and I felt like setting a fire today. No, there's usually a message behind that. I don't like insert person or entity you don't like here. And so even if nobody gets hurt, you're not just tossing that because you felt like it, for giggles. If somebody comes there because it's a place that they often go to, there's a fear there. There's a wonder naturally in the back of one's mind. Am I going to be safe here? What if I was here when these two Molotov cocktails came to the door? Could I have been hurt? Could I have been killed? If you have family that attends with you, same thing with them. So naturally, I know this wasn't necessarily terrorism, it was political because the conflict itself is political. But think about what the goals of terrorism are. There's usually a political reasoning behind it. In this case, the money involved in their perceived slights against Jewish people for money being sent over for this war. And nonetheless, part of it is to cause some kind of fear. And regardless of if the target was a building, they still caused, I'm pretty sure, in that community, a wave of fear.
They certainly did. And, it's, I was kind of surprised. I didn't even know that this appeal, I'll tell you how I found out about the appeal and the decision. Part of what I do now as a private investigator, I do handbag raids and counterfeit goods in Chinatown. And one of the sergeants I was working with was, hey, I'm watching you on New York 1. And I'm like, he goes, when did you have black hair? I'm like, a long time ago. He goes, oh, and they were giving the story and they were rerunning the perp walk. And I had no idea. And I said, that's what they're going to go with the appeal, that it was to a building and not a person. It's like we talk about, fire as a weapon. It's certainly not new. There's been fire, people use fire as weapons all through history, but, the thing with a fire, Mike, is, you set fire to your target building, the wind comes and, fire doesn't stay here. It lives, it breathes, it goes out and it looks for other, buildings and trees, everything that are in that area, go up with it, especially in a city like New York where we're so on top of each other. And, unless the fire department gets on it right away or there's some kind of containment, fire spreads very quickly. And I was surprised that was what they were going with, though. The appeal is that, you can't commit a crime to a building. But, at the end of the day, there's always somebody. Here's my question. Who is paying for these defenses? That's what you got, I figure they would argue, the usual things they argue with, custody. Do we have this right? Do we have that right? I'm like, that's what you're going with?
Yeah. And that's it. You know what that is, though? That's just desperation because I'm pulling up a picture here of the case. And I'll show it in a moment. That's desperation. I mean, think about it. You're in jail at that point. He was sentenced in 2003. He's 7 years into that sentence. He knows he's not going to get out for a while. And even if you're spending a day in jail, it's not fun. Imagine obviously spending, well, a decade out of your life or more than that, as he was at the time. And maybe he thought, because this appeal was filed, and this is just me Monday morning quarterbacking it. I don't have any investigative experience. Bill does, and that's why he's here and he's doing most of the talking, not me. But 2010, okay, time had passed. It's been 10 years. It obviously been a while since 9/11, although obviously nobody forgets about that. But nonetheless, he thought, okay, maybe since we're about a decade removed from this, I have a shot. And that's why he filed that. But obviously he doesn't. And he still served out the remainder of his sentence.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been too, there are groups out there who just feel like, if you're against having a hate crime law, maybe a group wanted to take the appeal on because they don't want that law on the books. So it's like we have to overturn this, not because necessarily we agree what he did, but because we don't, they're not thinking about this case, they're thinking about what happens down the road if it's another case, and we're giving this protection to a religious building. What happens if we give it to a police station, a court? You know what I mean? Like, where's the line stop? And I'm not putting myself in their head, but I'm going with that. That's probably what they were trying to do. But they're all out now. I mean, I don't know where they are, but I can tell you this: they're not in the state's custody anymore. They were only in for a while, and then they got out. They were out till the trial.
I think what helped them though is that nobody got hurt or killed, like I mentioned earlier. Because if there was an injury or worse yet, a fatality, they would have been done for. They'd still be in custody because that, and then there would have been even more added pressure to get this solved, obviously. So that the reason why they probably even had the avenue to file an appeal like that in the first place, as bogus as it is because of the fact that thankfully nobody was seriously injured or killed in it, because otherwise it's a moot point. And I will say that on its face, the incident itself is not funny, but the defense is. I hate the building, not you. I would never do anything to you.
Well, I mean, that's again, we see that going on now where they're burning it. I mean, certainly in the Pacific Northwest areas where they're trying to burn courts and they're trying to burn police stations. I mean, they've in some areas they burn police stations down, and it's like it's a form of protest. And again, I just see as a society we're accepting that, as maybe not all of us, but I mean, there's a segment of society that seems to be accepting that people are using fires, Molotovs, to express their anger, their fear, whatever. And I mean, it's just, I'm really concerned that it's become so matter of fact. And again, I'm seeing a more tolerant society about that, and that worries me.
In November of 2000, I believe you guys received a citation for good work on this case. I mean, it was solved quickly, and then obviously, even though the trial was a little bit lengthy, I mean, this happened in 2000. These guys weren't sentenced, at least Z wasn't until 2003. But nonetheless, I mean, you get recognized for it. It's not the first time you've been recognized. I'm sure it wasn't the last, but nonetheless, it had to feel good.
Yeah, it was nice to have, Fernando Ferrer, at the time he was the borough president of the Bronx. He gave myself and Detective Perret citations, and I mean, it was nice to have that. It was nice that we got it. I think they should have also given them to Nealon's and Honig. It's nice to take the bow and then the curtain call, but there were other people that involved in the case that I would have liked to have also seen recognized. But everybody, it's really a team effort. I mean, a lot of teamwork went into this. Excellent guys in crime scene, hate crimes task force people. But with that said, I'm glad I got mine.
There you go. So I will say this, okay, we're 21 years down the line removed from it. Obviously, this was in 2000. A lot happened since then. Obviously, the next year, the events of September 11th happened, and you talked about that the first time you were on the show and how devastating that was. As somebody who had worked 93, and got to know a lot of people in the building, obviously, people you work with on the job that perished that day or have since passed since from illnesses. We had in 2010 the attempted bombing in Times Square that thankfully didn't work out. There was the Chelsea bombing in 16, the attempted pipe bomb attack on the subway in 17, and the bombs that were sent to CNN, the New York Times. So, this case gets forgotten about. Obviously, it was particularly dwarfed by what would happen 11 months later. But nonetheless, here we are, 2 decades plus, the community's up and running perfectly fine. That synagogue's still there. What do you want people to remember still about this case? And how do you think it could set a good precedent in terms of detectives in A&E now to analyze it and learn from
it? Since I've left A&E, I've left the NYPD in 2004. My understanding is that now A&E actually has a diminished role in fires to churches, where now I think hate crimes is more or less, it's kind of switched now. They're the lead on it. But with that being said, I think that you have to look at the multiple approach, bringing everybody's discipline. You can't forget how important it is to get the you have all the guys in the special units, getting the accolades and different things. As I'll keep saying it, the early resolution of this case and some of the best clues we got came from 2 guys stuck on midnights in the 50 on patrol, having their eyes open and having some curiosity and seeing something, and they didn't know what they had, but like, all right, let's take a look at it, let's document it. And I think that was invaluable. But I think it's one of those things where you're going to see more of this. I know I sound like a broken record, but I think as people are becoming more comfortable using fire as a means to almost a type of political hate speech, I think you're going to see more. You're going to certainly show more arsons. You're going to see more arsons to places that are, whether it's a religious place or it's a political place. And I'm unfortunately seeing that people are getting way too comfortable with that, and that concerns me a great deal.
You know what? I don't mean to cut you off, but you know what might have helped you guys in 2000 is that what wasn't around in 2000? Twitter. Facebook, Instagram, social media, period, to where what's happening now, you can control your own narrative, whether that be good or bad with social media. However you want to put it out there and however you want to frame it, you can frame it. And you'll have people who will buy it, rather if it's truthful, rather if it's genuine or not. You'll have people that are subscribed to whatever it is that you're selling, to where if somebody does want to torch something, if somebody does want to burn anything or use any kind of weapon, let alone fire, they could put it out there. And especially with Twitter, which is why I really don't mess with Twitter like that anymore, you'll have people that'll support it and support it in droves, to where even if it is a small segment of society, when you put something out there and it's got 3,000 retweets and 10,000 likes, as abhorrent as it may be, it motivates you further.
You know what, Mike? You're absolutely right. If you go to some of the articles that you're citing, and if you look at them online, you can look down and some of them have comments, and be surprised at some of the people are saying. That not everybody was for the prosecution. There were people that felt there shouldn't be a hate crime for it. There really is. Like you said, I can't imagine if we had the social media platforms then that we have now. But I get out of the department long before we had social media and Facebook and everything. So it's a whole different world. It's a whole different type of investigation.
And Rabbi Dov Katz, who has been running that particular synagogue since 1998, said it is.
Yeah, he's still there.
He's still there. He says a crime against a synagogue or a church or a mosque is a crime against all the people associated with that institution. It is an affront to our common humanity, end quote. And what's sad about this, and we'll wrap up with this, is that Aziz at the time, I'm 21 now, I'll be 22 in February. He was my age. He was 21. And look at what he did, in this moment of hatred and losing his cool and being wrapped up in this twisted zeal, he threw his life away. Imagine you're 21, he got sentenced in 03, so he was 24 by that point. You're 24 and you're spending the next 15 years of your life in a jail cell. That's time lost, to say the least.
And you know what? I mean, think about it. You're a convicted felon. That's a problem for any human being. But, what you're convicted of, it's also, you think about it, like, Google this guy's name and this comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, he can say what he wants, but, a lot of the press that you get on that is because when I was in the trial and I was talking about the effing rich Jews in Riverdale, I mean, that I think hit every paper in the city and linked to this guy's name permanently. So, I mean, did he throw his life away? I'd like to think he can rehabilitate himself and do something.
Hopefully.
But, maybe he'll learn from the experience, but, I think any young man, whether you commit an arson or a murder, you do 15 years, you do 5 years, it changes you. There's a whole metamorphosis that occurs in prison. Once you've done real time, anybody who's done it will tell you, you're never the same. It changes you. But they chose their action, and I mean, whether it was done because it was political or whatever, your actions take consequences. That's like when you see all these people with the Antifa and all the other demonstrations all over the country, people burning things, people breaking things, you're getting arrested and, people are like, oh, but it's political. I'm like, listen, some of you guys are political, but I'm seeing guys walking out with TVs and radios and, purses and jewelry, making money.
PS5s,
whatever it takes, it's it's maybe a little bit political, but certainly a lot of it's just an opportunity to get free stuff. What are you going to do?
So this was a deep dive. We normally do rapid fire at the end of the show, but this was a different kind of episode. It was more specialized to a specific case, so we'll forego it. And this was a deep dive into the 2000 attempted firebombing of a synagogue in Riverdale. And that's the fun part about the Mike Colón podcast is that, doing these NYPD and FDNY interviews, there's these hidden stories that most of the people forget about. I know I didn't know this story until I talked with Bill off the air about it. And we can get him on and tell it, have this story told and have it archived so that, we can kind of revisit a unique time period in New York City. This was pre 9/11. But this was at a time when New York City was very familiar with the threat that terrorism, particularly terrorism emanating from the Middle East, could pose. And so I'm glad that we got Bill on. Bill, if you haven't, I know you have your private investigation firm. So if you want to plug that, go right ahead.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Ryan Investigative Group, 347-417-1610, ryaninvestigators.com. And give us a call and help you.
Yeah, if you need a PI, he specializes in finding missing persons. He obviously specializes in fraud as well. If you want, there's like a whole CNBC feature featuring Bill taking a CNBC reporter through and showing her all the shops where they're selling counterfeit handbags. He's good at that too. And obviously fire investigations. He was in A&E for 13 of his 20 years. He knows a lot about that too. And I'll link his contact information in the description of the episode. My end, I'll link my contact information too if you want to reach me. And by now, if you know, Twitter, Mike New Haven, Instagram, original_MC1, LinkedIn, Mike Colón, type in MIC''D to find me. So coming up on the Mike New Haven podcast Friday will be retired FDNY Captain Dennis Tardio. Dennis did 25 years with the FDNY, and he was featured in the French brothers Jules and Gideon Audace documentary on 9/11, discussing rescue operations in the North Tower. He and his men all made it out that day. And so Captain Tardio will join me Friday. And Monday, a guy that Bill worked with, he was in the bomb squad with Bill, crossed paths with him many a time for volume 15 of Tales from the Boom Room, Jeff Oberdeer, who, as he told me off the air, in that funny accent of his, I'm not making fun of him, but he said this candidly, I'm the only hillbilly in the bomb squad. So he'll be here next week. And I'm looking forward to talking with Jeff and hearing his stories. In the meantime, on behalf of retired NYPD Arson Explosion Detective First Grade, Bill Ryan, this has been Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's Arson Explosion and Bomb Squad. We will see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.